Hello, welcome everyone to another edition of the Intel with Greg Cosell on Inside the Birds. I'm Jeff Mosher alongside Adam Kaplan, and with us is Greg Cosell, and we are going to continue having Greg break down the tape of NFL 2025 draft prospects. We've done a bunch of position groups, and in this particular episode, we're going to look at cornerback group. And Greg, this is a position, oddly enough, that the Eagles really failed at for almost 2 decades. And then last year, boom, they get a 2-for-1. First round, second round pick, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, a nickel, at least for right now. And they really hit the nail on the head of the nail on that one.
They sure did. Yeah. I mean, I remember doing both guys last year, and they were both really good prospects. And obviously it worked out. You know, Mitchell, did Mitchell miss many snaps this year at all? I mean, he probably played 95% of the snaps.
I would think.
Yeah. So in DeJean, I mean, obviously going to be interesting to see what they do with him because he was so good in the slot. You know, again, they're probably not going to ask my opinion, but I'd keep him there.
At least for this year. Yeah. One question. The draft last year, Nate Wiggins went after Quinyon. Quinyon was the first corner to go.
He played well in Wiggins.
What do you think of Wiggins last year?
Yeah, he played well. He played left corner in their nickel because he did not start, but, you know, teams play a lot of nickel. I don't know the percentage that the Ravens played. I know the Eagles played one of the highest percentages of nickel in the NFL, so DeJean played a lot of snaps. But Wiggins played left corner in their nickel because they moved Humphrey inside, Marlon Humphrey, who had a really good year last year and has been a quality player in the league for a long time. But Wiggins played well, and he got a lot of snaps as – he was essentially their nickel corner. He just didn't play in the slot.
Got you.
So that pick worked out for the Ravens as well.
Nice.
Definitely. Greg, this is going to be a fascinating episode. As always, when we do this show, I not only enjoy your breakdowns, but the context and the discussions that we tend to have. And I think the first guy we're going to talk about is going to invite a real interesting discussion. And it's TravisHunter of Colorado. And the discussion isn't the fact that he might be just as good of a wide receiver as a corner. We'll definitely get your tape breakdown on him as a corner. And then when we do wide receiver, we'll get that. But you on this show with us, we often talk about coaches' philosophies, strategies, progressive coaching versus old school coaching. And we had this conversation about Jalen Walker from Georgia. Where are you going to play the guy? And the one thing I keep thinking of with TravisHunter, and I wanted to pick your brain on, is I feel like this is a good test study or a case study for what we call the quote unquote old school approach versus the progressive coaching approach. But because I'm just trying to think about how coaches run practices and how coordinators, defensive coordinators or offensive coordinators, they want structure. They got to plan this stuff out beforehand. They need to know where their guys are going to be, in what packages.
Right.
The guy who could possibly play as much offense or defense, or a lot of offense and defense, or a lot of defense and offense. And I wonder how this is going over with the coaching staffs on accepting the fact that you may have a player who's not 100% part of all of your packages or all of your practice time because he's moonlighting or doubling in another spot. And I think that causes a lot of interesting conversations in coaching meetings.
That's the larger issue, is not whether he's capable of playing both positions and maybe playing 100 snaps a game. Mm-hmm. Maybe he is. Maybe he's that freak, because what he did in college is freakish. We have to accept that was freakish. The guy's clearly unique, but it's not so much whether he's physically capable, guys, of doing that. It's the practice time during the week, because we know how detailed and nuanced that the game is for coaches. And because I know you guys talk to coaches, I talk to coaches, and I remember, I'll never forget Dennis Allen a number of years ago when he was still the head coach of the Saints, and I was down in New Orleans for OTAs, and he said to me, we have 10 versions of cover 3. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, that probably means you have 10 versions of cover 4 and 10 versions of this and 10 versions of that. And so it's not that Hunter's not physically capable of doing these things, but how do you deal with the practice time during the week? And that works for both sides of the ball. Even receiver. Now, receiver could be a little different because technically, with receivers, I think back to when I did the book with Ron Jaworski and studied Don Coryell. And Don Coryell, who actually many people don't know, began his career as a run game coach and then moved to San Diego State as a head coach. And back then he was playing all the Pac-12 schools, and they were getting all the big guys on the defensive and offensive lines. So he couldn't compete with that. And he was a run game guy. So he said, okay, how can I compete? And that's when he started basically Air Coryell. He said, I have to play on the perimeter and I have to win with speed. And back then you could bring a transfer in on Tuesday and he could play on Saturday. So what he did is he created the number system so that he could bring a wide receiver in on Tuesday and basically say, hey, we're going to give you 3 routes, a 9, a 6, and an 8. And you're going to be the first in, we're going left to right. You're going to line up on the left. So you're always the first number. So theoretically, it's easier to do that as a receiver, but obviously the game is also advanced. So it's really a function of practice. It's not a function of playing the game on Sunday.
It's exactly what I was thinking. Adam, let's hypothetically say, Adam, that the Eagles got TravisHunter, right? And Vic Fangio is trying to indoctrinate this guy into his defense. And you tell Vic Fangio, sorry, you can't have him for 15% of your defensive snaps because he's going to be lining up at wide receiver. This guy is already, last year they modified their practices, made them longer, made them tougher, and he was still, by November, still complaining about.
Well, you can't imagine, Jeff, imagine telling Vic Fangio during the week that, hey, you can't have TravisHunter for 40% of your work.
Right.
Oh, I mean, it's one thing that Jeff said for 15%. So, by the way, the word I've gotten from clubs and coaches and personnel people is he's a corner as a changeup could play receiver. Not that he couldn't play both if you really wanted him to, but as Greg has told us, because he talks to a lot of people as we do, eventually you're gonna have to play one position mostly. Now, early on, special packages.
That's what'll happen.
Whatever the case may be. Yeah, whatever the case may be. Yeah, sure. But he's going to play majority at corner, barring a surprise. Maybe there's 1 or 2 teams I don't know yet who said, you know what, hell with that. We're going to play him at receiver and not much at corner. Sure. We don't know what 32 teams are thinking, but everything I've heard so far is corner more than receiver.
And by the way, I should mention for those who forgot, this has been done before. I think the last player to do it was Chris Gamble, the cornerback for was he with the Panther? I forget.
Oh, yeah, out of Ohio State. Wow, was he a receiver?
He caught passes.
And I'm trying to remember, did Champ Bailey play any receiver in the NFL when he came?
Was he a running back?
He was a receiver at Georgia, as well as a corner. Obviously, he's a Hall of Fame corner.
Right. But these were guys who would occasionally go out there and catch it. Not discussed as guys who might spend 20 or 30% of their time playing on the other side of the ball, the way it's been discussed with TravisHunter. That's why I think it's a fascinating discussion, and I imagine different teams have different perspectives on TravisHunter and how they would use him and be able to accommodate all the coaches who have loud voices in that room.
The thing with Hunter, and then we'll move on, is you just get so excited when you see the explosiveness as a receiver. That because he's one of those guys. I mean, he didn't have to do a whole lot from a receiver standpoint in the context of their offense in terms of nuanced route running. I'm sure he's capable of it. But, when you throw a hitch to him and he just turned and he goes from 0 to 60 in about half a step. I mean, his explosiveness, his athleticism is off the charts, and that just gets, offensive coaches excited because, what offensive coach doesn't want to throw a 6-yard hitch and have it become a 50-yard touchdown?
None that I know of, Greg.
Right.
By the way,
defensive coordinators, but that's it.
Champ Bailey had 4 receptions in his career and 9 targets. That's it.
So there you go. So I mean, it's hard. It's the preparation part. It's not the fact that he couldn't physically do it. Maybe he can, maybe he can't. I don't know. But anyway, that's
interesting.
That's where we stand on him right now.
So let's get a tape breakdown, Greg. As a cornerback, TravisHunter's tape breakdown.
Yeah, I mean, Hunter is. I mean, he's just a sudden twitchy athlete. He's got really good length. Now, he has kind of a lean frame. Although I will say this, I don't think he looks the same as the player I'm going to mention. He looks leaner on tape, but he's actually the exact same height and weight as Derek Stingley. But he looks different on tape. And we know about Derek Stingley, how good a player he is. So it's not that's going to be an issue for Hunter. It's just a thought I had watching him, thinking how it could impact man-to-man versus some of the bigger physical receivers. Where I thought he really stood out, guys, on tape, was playing what we call mirror match press man, where you don't necessarily jam the receiver, although he did that at times with targeted physicality, and he did it very well. But Mostly he played mirror match, and I got to tell you, he made it look simple. Now, in the Big 12, he wasn't playing the best receivers in America, but he has such quick, light feet, fluid hips. He's so smooth and comfortable in his transitions and change of direction. He just, like I said, he made it look easy. I thought he was better playing press, mirror match press, than he was playing off coverage. But in zone, he still is a really good zone player as well, because he has a really good feel for route concepts and combinations. He understands where the conflict areas are. I mean, he's a good football player. You know, it's hard to look at his tape and come away and say, gee, this guy's not a good football player. Now, I don't get caught up, as you guys know, in generational and this and that, but the guy's a really good prospect at the corner position.
All right, Greg, let's move on. And a guy, I'm interested to see where you think he should be in terms of a cornerback or nickel or whatever. Jahdae Barron from Texas, what are your thoughts on his team?
Yeah, that's the question. Jahdae Barron in 2023, when I watched his tape, played predominantly in the slot. And then this year, he predominantly played outside. Now, he still played in the slot at times. So, you know, he has a ton of experience at both. This will be a function of coaches and in the eye of the beholder, okay? I personally think, it doesn't make me right, just so people understand, but I personally think that his best fit in the league is as a slot corner. That's my feeling. I think that it just fits the way in which he plays. He's a super high-level competitor playing with physicality and aggression. He can play the run. He can blitz. You know, in the slot, you see more of that than you do outside. I think he's really good in zone coverage. I think he understands his role based on receiver splits. He plays with great eye discipline. And then when he sees it, he has a really quick trigger. To me, he has a really compact body, and he doesn't really have length. So to me, his physical and athletic profile speaks more slot. But it's not that he's small. There are corners who are 5'11", 194 in the NFL. And he did run really well. I mean, his athletic testing was pretty good. The concern on the outside, and I know we start getting into this is scout talk, but it's true and it's valid. His arms were under 30 inches. So very often when your arms are under 30 inches, that's not seen as necessarily an outside corner. But he's just another guy that's a really good football player. You know, he's a guy you'd want in your defensive back room, and he plays with a swagger and an intensity. But I see him more as a slot in the NFL.
See, on what Greg just said, Jeff, if that's the way he's going to be viewed, now we don't know what all 32 teams are thinking, but they're watching the same tape, and they have access to the measurables. As good of a football player as he is, you don't draft inside corners very early. You just don't.
Right.
He's going to have to me, he's going to have to be an outside corner. If you're going to select him in the upper half of the first round, he's got to be an outside corner.
It's interesting because if you went back in time, right, because this is what the discussion about Mikey Sanderstill out of Michigan was like last year. Now, having the benefit of hindsight and seeing that Sanderstill actually played fairly well for the Commanders as an outside corner, you wonder if he would have been a little bit high. He went 50th overall, which is, high in the second round. Maybe had teams projected him to be able to play the outside, if they redrafted, he might be a first round pick.
It's funny because the guy I kind of thought of, and this guy played outside corner in college as well, and he's actually turned out to be a really good pro. He's just on a really bad team, so a lot of people don't know him. When I finished watching Barron, my last line in my transition was, is there a Roger McCreary comparison to be made?
Wow.
And McCreary was a really good outside corner at Auburn. His tape was great, but he had really short arms, and he's been a really good slot. Like I said, no one knows him because he's on Tennessee, and they've not been very good since he got there. Right. But Barron, to me, kind of struck me more as that kind of player. Maybe I'll be wrong. Look, a team could draft him and play him on the outside, and as Adam said, that would raise his draft profile quite a bit. If you're going to draft him as an outside corner, then maybe he is a top 10 or top 12 pick. But as Adam said, and he's 100% right, if you see him as purely a slot, you're not drafting him at number 9. And I don't even know who picks 9. I'm just throwing that out.
Right. Let's move on to a next corner. We did talk about a Michigan corner with Mikey Sanderson. Now we'll talk about Will Johnson, Greg. And then I'm curious if you even went back 2 years ago, because I know
I did.
I
watched Will Johnson last summer.
Changed, if any, on him.
Will Johnson, it was very frustrating for me to watch this year. He played 6 games. I watched 4 of them. Last summer, I watched 7 games. And I loved Will Johnson last year when I watched him. In fact, I was very curious what he'd run in the 40, and there's no 40 time on him because I thought after watching him last summer from 2023, I thought that there was a legit comparison to Patrick Surtain. Legit. I'm not saying he's the exact same guy, but we're dealing with 6'1" 3/4, 194, really good length, really good size. He didn't run a 40 either at the combine or at Michigan's pro day, so I don't know what his 40 time is. But then I watched his tape this year. I just didn't see the same guy. And again, the traits don't change. It's not like, oh my God, he doesn't have the traits. But they played a ton of off coverage. He's capable of playing press. He's capable of playing off. But Jeff, I just didn't see the same guy. But yet the traits are there. And if you get the traits at their best, you could argue he's got the best traits of any corner in the draft, and maybe including Hunter. But I don't know what to do with him right now. I'm just being honest.
So he only played 6 games last year, correct?
And I watched 4 of them.
Right. So he was a little banged up. Obviously, the offense at Michigan was terrible, so the defense was probably on the field a lot more. And then no Jesse Minter as a defense, not Jesse Minter. Yeah, the defense coordinator who went with Harbaugh to try. I wonder if all those 3 things just contribute to a guy who just, couldn't replicate the year before, but is still a very talented player.
See, here's what I typed last summer, okay? When I took notes, okay? And as I said, I watched 7 games last summer from 2023 when he pretty much played the whole season. I said Johnson's traits profile is elite with his size-length combination and his ability to play both mirror match and physical press man. And despite being a little high cut, he more often than not showed smooth change of direction and plant and drive and off coverage. And you cannot overlook his competitive toughness and physicality. That's what I typed last summer. I didn't quite see that this year, so I don't know what to make of that.
So, Jeff, you should know he had a turf toe injury, which is really bad.
Yep.
It's harder for a younger player because as you know, when you tear ligaments in your that's what turf toe is. He had a really bad case of it. Then he had a hamstring injury earlier this year, so he's got to show that he's ready to go. And he's, as Greg just outlined, a terrific football player.
Yeah.
But then you've got the tape that Greg talked about, which wasn't quite as good as 23. Plus the injury. So it's going to be interesting to see where he goes. We're working on kind of his sort of area where he should go, but the injury throws a wrench into it.
And the turf toe, by the way, I've had a similar injury, and it is incredibly painful. I mean, so, I can imagine trying to play football. I had a tough time walking sometimes.
I suspect there will be coaching staff, scouting personnel staffs that look at the tape from 2 years ago and say, that guy is in there. We've seen it. We know it's there. Let's get him into our environment, our coaching, and we can get him back to being that guy. That's usually the case, unless a guy is just completely.
And again, I don't know the kid, so I think he's supposed to be a really good kid. So but again, I don't do that kind of due diligence. I don't work for a team, so I'm not bringing him in for a visit.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
All right, next up, a guy that I know a lot of fans who have their team picking late in the first round, early in the second round, are looking at Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. What do you think of his tape?
I liked his tape a lot. He's long. He ran really well at the it's funny. I did him before the combine. And so when I finished doing him, I said, God, I'm very anxious to see what he runs. And he ran 4.43. And I think that really helped him. I think that he's long, he's lean, he's got a prototypical perimeter corner frame. He can play man. He's a really good zone corner. I mean, that to me really stood out because a lot of corners in college, because the game is different, the hash marks are different, the route concepts, even if they're similar, they're because the symmetry of the field is different. It's just different in college football than it is in the NFL. So, I just thought that he was a really good zone corner, understanding receiver splits and routes. I thought he was a great communicator on the back end. He had a really good sense of spacing and eye discipline. I think that he will best project to teams that play a high percentage of man and cover 3, where matching up outside the numbers is demanded. And I really like the way this guy played. I loved his length. I really like this guy. Again, I don't know where guys get drafted, but I really liked his tape.
Sure feels like Ole Miss is going to get half of its defense drafted to the NFL. Every edition we've done with you, Greg, it feels like there's been a Mississippi player.
They got too many guys, Jeff. It did, way too many guys.
Yeah, that's too bad for them.
Yeah.
Let's move on to a corner who has a visit, or either has or had a visit with the Philadelphia Eagles, a 30 visit out of Kentucky, named Maxwell Hairston.
Yeah, he's another guy that got hurt this year, but fortunately I watched him last summer, and another guy that I really, really liked. Was almost exclusively the boundary corner in Kentucky's defense. So for people to understand that, he played to the short side of the field, which is shorter in college than it is in the NFL because of the hash marks. Although he did play more to the field in 2024 than in 2023. I thought he's another guy that I thought really understood zone coverage at a high level. And it may be why the Eagles brought him in, because obviously they do play with all these quarters concepts and the variations of quarters. They play a lot of zone. I thought he really understood the mandates of zone coverage extremely well. Pattern recognition, spatial awareness. He understood how to minimize the conflict areas that are inherent in zone. He did play some mirror match press man. He certainly has the physical traits to play it. He ran a 4.28 at the combine. The only concern you have with him, and this is team and scheme specific, is he's 5'11 and a quarter and 183. So now you have to decide, do I want an outside corner at 183? So, and he's thin looking. He's a thin framed guy, but he's really, I think his corner traits for the outside are really good. You just have to decide what the 183 means.
Yeah, and his vert was really good. That's interesting. Yeah, he's because you see that speed, Jeff, as we throw it back to you. And coaches are going to love this because you just can't find guys who could run this fast. Mm-hmm. Now the question will be, from a body type, can he put some mass on his frame, because it's a little bit smaller than you would like.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what wasn't Isaiah Rodgers like 5'11 and in the 180s?
You can play. You can play like that. I'm not saying you can't, but you guys know that different teams have different critical factors.
Sure.
But his athletic testing was really good. 4.28 vertical jump was 39.5, broad was 10.9. His arm length is fine, 31 inches. I mean, the athletic testing was really good, and the tape is good. He just got hurt this year, so he only played, 6 games maybe, but his tape's good.
All right, Greg, moving on to Iowa State, Darien Porter, cornerback for the Cyclones.
He's an interesting guy because he's only played corner for a couple of years. In that sense, he's very much like Tariq Woolen of the Seahawks, who went to UTSA as a wide receiver and then transitioned to corner for his final 2 seasons. And Porter kind of did the same thing. He was a wide receiver. He was recruited as a wide receiver. He played 3 years at Ohio State as a wide receiver and then was moved to corner for the 2022 season. He was a 400-meter state champion in Georgia. He broke the Iowa State record. This kid, he ran a 4.340. This kid can run. He's 6'3", 195. I get the sense watching him that he's still kind of learning how to play corner, but there's not many corners with that traits profile. I mean, and he played mirror match press pretty well, good patience, stayed in phase, opened his hips. I think his off coverage to me wasn't quite as good. When you're that tall, you tend to be a little high cut and long legged. And And I thought there were times where his transition and change of direction and off coverage was a little sticky and segmented, not as smooth as you like. So to me, that was the main concern. But he's certainly got top-end speed to match and carry deep routes. Did a good job getting his head around to find the ball. I think you're dealing with a guy that could be an ascending player because he's still kind of learning the position. Ridiculous arm length for a corner, too. And ran an incredible 20-yard shuttle for a size at 4.04, which is phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeff,
you know this, Adam. When you're 6'3" corner, you have long arms, and you run was it a 4.2 or a 4.3?
He ran a 4.3.
6'3", you're a top 50 pick. Someone's taking a chance on you really early in the draft. Yeah.
You know, I think his arm length, believe it or not, is I'll double check this, but I'm pretty certain it's either very close to, if not longer than Will Campbell. I mean,
it's longer than Will Campbell.
Yeah, think about it. The guy's a corner. It's crazy.
Another guy who can scratch his knees without bending down. It's fantastic.
Pretty good. Pretty good. All right, next guy. All right, so Greg, Ben Morrison's a guy that I know a lot of people have talked about who's pretty gifted, but I'm interested to see what your thoughts on him are.
Another guy that got hurt. So, fortunately, I watched him a good amount last summer in 2023. Yeah. Another guy that's got good size. He's over 6. I thought his 2023 tape showed a pretty high-level corner prospect, good length, smooth movement. Another guy comfortable playing mirror match press. I thought there were times he was, deceptively sudden as a mover. So this year, he didn't play very much. I watched, I think, a couple of games, but he got hurt and was pretty much done for the season.
Yeah, he's had hip problems, and this is a real issue. Yeah, clubs have to. He's had a couple hip injuries. This is concerning, but he's pretty gifted.
Yeah, he's pretty gifted. I thought, there were some things he has to clean up. I thought he didn't stop really well, and that's a big deal. It's a big deal for receivers and corners. You have to be able to stop. And I don't think he did that real well. And I thought at times he lost contact with receivers at the top of the route stem. That's something that he would have to work on. But he does. He looks the part. He was kind of deceptively sudden with loose hips, easy change of direction. He was poised. He was patient. I thought he was a good prospect. But again, you're dealing with injuries now.
Greg, everybody we've talked about so far has been a very, very high-end athlete. I'm going to throw another one at you.
That's what you're kind of looking for.
You definitely are.
Yeah.
The kid out of East Carolina, Shavon Revel, another guy who tested really well athletically.
Yeah, well, this guy's, again, he played 3 games this year. I watched all 3, and then I took a peek at some stuff from last year, but he may be the best press man corner prospect in this draft class. That's what this guy is. He's close to 6'2". He's 194. He has really long arms. He knew how to deploy them strategically and effectively in targeted press man coverage. He struck with force. He had strong, powerful hands. He disrupted wide receivers' releases. The big question, it comes back to the Jahdae Hunt, question, is the 3 games he played this year were Norfolk State, Old Dominion, and App State. He's not playing in the Power 5. But I got to tell you, this guy, he was clearly a press man corner. That was his comfort level. And when he played off, sometimes you saw a little hip tightness and kind of sticky transitions. But the press stuff is just really, really good. And this guy had an attitude. So it was fun to watch, but to me, you'd have to teach him a lot as far as playing off coverage because there's so many things that go into off as far as understanding splits, route combinations, route concepts, you working in tandem with others. Whereas when you're playing press, it's, hey, that's my cat. I got him. And this guy's a press man corner to me.
What do we think is tougher, teaching a press man corner how to play off or teaching a guy who's only played off coverage how to be a press man corner?
I can only give you my opinion. I think maybe, it's possible, a defensive back coach would disagree. I think it's tougher to teach a guy to play off coverage and with zone concepts, Jeff, because now you're getting into receiver splits, route combinations, What kind of splits are there? Receiver, what we call distribution, and then receiver location. Routes are different if it's 3 wideouts to one side versus, let's say, it's 2 wideouts and a tight end. Let's say it's 1 wideout, a tight end, and a running back. You get all kinds of different route concepts and combinations that you have to be taught. Then you're also working in tandem with other players. You're working in tandem perhaps with a safety. Not perhaps, you are. Then you're working in tandem with underneath coverage. How does the underneath coverage, the linebacker level, where are their responsibilities? What are their responsibilities? I think that there's more to teach with all that than there is to say, hey, you got that guy. Now, then you have to teach technique, but hey, it's you got that guy, Right. So that's my sense of it.
Hey, real quick, so we should just let people know, Revel tore his ACL in September. So he's over the last 3 seasons, he's only played 24 games. That's not a lot. And he's coming off a major injury. So that's something to keep it.
And not against Power 5 schools.
Right. That's correct. Yep.
All right. Let's talk about a corner who is not, at least from athletic testing standpoint, as high end as some of the other guys. And that's Azareye'h Thomas. Do I have that pronunciation correct, out of Florida State?
We'll just call him Thomas for now.
AT.
Yeah.
That'll work.
Now, there's another guy. I mean, you're dealing with a guy that Florida State is a man press heavy defense. We saw that a year ago when Renardo Green came out and was drafted in the 2nd round by the Niners. Thomas then this year became a starter. This was the first year he became a full-time starter. So in fact, he replaced Green. So he's another guy that has outstanding length, 6'1.5", 197, tremendous arm length. I don't have a 40 time. I don't know if he has one from a pro day, if they had their pro day. But you're dealing with a guy that has outstanding length, long arms, really impressive wingspan. He's a press man corner. That's the way they play it at Florida State. So that's kind of his deal, So can he play off? Again, now you get into teaching him how to do that. But there were reps in which he played to his length and physicality at a high level, smothering wide receivers off the ball, disrupting their route timing, and at times just removing them as options for the quarterback. So that's what he is. Now you get into, what can you teach him? But I think there'll be some questions just based on tape, because I don't have a 40 time, but I think there'll be some questions about his speed to run vertically, given the fact that he's, long-legged, high cut, and and the transition needed to open up his hips and run. I think there'll be questions about that.
Hey, Jeff, by the way, almost all of these corners, save for a couple that we talked about, have good size.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them can run. Now,
really good size.
Yeah, it's interesting because, boy, we all know this. If you get a corner over 6 foot that could run, you're going to at least go in the 3rd round unless your tape's terrible, because it's hard to find guys who've got length who could run. It's not easy.
Right. All right, let's finish this off. Last corner, we're going to talk about Ohio State's Denzel Burke.
Yeah, Denzel Burke was a guy I've done for years because I kept thinking he was going to come out. You guys may remember.
Yeah, last year I thought. Yep.
Well, after the 2022 season, people said this guy's a top 10 pick. And so I watched his 2022 tape, his 2023 tape, and now this year. I always thought this guy was a pretty high-level corner prospect. And I don't know where he's going to get drafted. He's 5'11 and a quarter, 186, not as big as some of the other guys, but he's got long arms for that size. He ran well, 4.48. That's pretty good. It's not great, but it's not a problem. I think he's got quick, active, sudden feet. I think, he's got extensive experience playing both to the boundary and the field. He's got extensive experience playing press man and off coverage with multiple zone coverages and techniques that demand different eye focus and discipline. I think you're dealing with a guy that has higher end athleticism, natural quickness. I think he can carry receivers vertically. I really liked him. And, he's one of those guys that for some reason is not being talked about. And I never understand that. And who knows, maybe there's something going on. I think he projects as one of the better outside corner prospects in the draft, barring anything dramatic or unforeseen. My guess is he could probably play in the slot too. But, based on everything I see, And again, I don't take that as gospel, but he's certainly not being talked about in the top 30 or top 35 right now. But and I'm not saying he should or shouldn't be, but I think he's a very good corner prospect.
Jeff, you know what's really funny about Denzel Burke? So last year for Pro Football Network, I was doing mocks for them. And my first mock, I put him in the first round. Then he decided not to leave school.
Right.
But then since then, you're kind of right, because usually, when you talk to people, there's buzz around. Let's leave the media out of it, or fans on Twitter and all that stuff. Just from scouting circles, you don't hear a lot about Burke. Greg's right. It's funny. I now that he brought that up, I got to ask, like, where these people are on him. It's funny.
Yeah. We'll see where he goes.
I think his tape's good, and I think he's got traits. I mean, we'll see. That's the thing. I mean, it's funny because in 2023, he was named first team All Big Ten and second team All American. That wasn't the case in 2024, but, and of course, Ohio State's another school that has, like 1,000 guys on defense that are coming out. But he's, again, we'll see how the draft plays out. This is going to be an odd draft because there's going to be guys that drop that people like, and there's going to be other guys that all of a sudden, wow, that guy is in the first round because, this is, teams are different than the guys who do the mock guesses.
Absolutely. We've come a long way over the last decade when a corner runs in the 4.4s and we say, hey, that's not a problem. That's okay.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Great stuff. Really interesting cornerback group. A lot of good athletes, a lot of long athletes. As Adam mentioned, this one will be very fascinating leading up to the NFL draft. That's going to do it for our look at corners for Greg Cosell and Adam Kaplan. I'm Jeff Mosher, and you've been watching the Intel with Greg Cosell.